Take three. So, I didn't do a PowerPoint because I didn't know how I was going to sync it up to the camera, my computer. If you can't hear me, I'm sorry, my computer's not very good. I'm just going to be reading my paper. I had chapter 7, the health, travel, and safety chapter. It was only 9 pages, so I didn't have much to write about. I ended up just attacking the author, really, or the authors. Yeah. So I'm going to get started. Brazil stereotyped. In exploration of Brazil's culture, we find that the American stigma thereof, as seen in William and Branco's The Essential Guide to Custom and Culture, is erroneous. As such, the author's own attempt at explicating the customs seen in Brazil, in contrast to the American allegation, is itself an imputation on Brazilian culture. This reproach is likely unavoidable, simply due to the outsider's perspective made evident by the author's disposition on some of the seemingly different customs therein. As a result, regardless of the author's intentions, the travel and safety excerpt details the many ways that Brazilians interact with tourists and thereby unintentionally leaves the reader more fearful of Brazilians than welcoming. In addition to this constant unnecessary admonition, the advice given consists of superfluous hyperboles and strong phrasing that makes negatives more apparent and seem almost unavoidable. For example, within the travel, health, and safety chapter, a majority of the passage establishes that a tourist would do well to hide his or her money, to not talk to Brazilians while publicly traveling, to all but avoid being on the road, and to never wander anywhere at night while establishing little else in favor of Brazilian customs. Subsequently, readers are exposed to many stereotypes and are unwittingly urged to distrust Brazil and to fear Brazilian culture, albeit unintentionally. The passage begins harmlessly enough, noting only that visitors be aware of passport laws and that a copy of a passport is better stolen than the passport itself. However, soon after, the reader is made aware of the public health care's never-ending wait lists, where nothing seems to function as it should, and even after treatment there is still much to be desired. In essence, the authors are merely saying that private health care is far better in comparison than public health care. However, the idea comes across, given the author's word choice, is not that one would be wise to choose to get private health care, but rather that one would be unwise and even unsafe if one were to choose public health care. Likewise, the authors proceed to describe the precautions necessary to safely transport money. It's important to note that it's paramount to carry cash safely regardless of the location one resides. In changing money, the authors describe the long wait necessary and the steps thereafter that Brazilians often perform that one should emulate. Brazilians often put their cash into separate pockets to ensure that, under the circumstance that one is robbed, only some of the money would be taken. The authors repeat this statement once more later, also adding that some Brazilians carry 2 wallets instead of simply separating the cash. The authors continue to say that most people have stories of themselves or close acquaintances being mugged. By the same token, the authors declare the importance of using an ATM at the right time and at the right place. However, they continue to claim that it is best, if not necessary, to use ATMs only within banks and not on the streets, especially at night. The gesture made by the authors is seemingly that it is wise to take precautions with handling money. However, they again make it seem that being mugged is unavoidable, therein making out that Brazil is a savage place. Now, I agree that it's critical that one should not flash one's money, but it's unlikely that one is going to be mugged. And they seem to make it like an inevitable thing. In the event of driving, the authors describe the hellish conditions of Brazilian transit. They describe the slow traffic, the erratic drivers, the potholes large enough to swallow a whole car, and the inefficient roads therein. When touring a country such as Brazil, driving is usually imperative, and it's a chief point to know the situation in which one will be driving. The authors attempt to describe the conditions of the roads, that one can easily be lost, hurt, or worse. The authors attempt to describe the conditions of the road that one can easily be hurt, lost, or worse. However, information like this should be presented matter-of-factly along with driving procedures one should take when in a foreign country, i.e., which side of the road to drive on or when to expect gas stations, etc. Contrarily, the authors do little more than state the awful conditions one will endure when driving. Though this matter of detailing is not inherently misguided, it does add to the unnecessary discrediting of the country. This defamation is increased when the authors continue to state the conditions of transit via car, train, and bus as compared to that of a plane or a taxi. They go on to say that taxis are the safest mode of transport along with planes. However, in their doing so, made it out that the conditions of buses and traffic are intolerable and unsafe. This again adds to the thought of an unavoidable mishappening that the authors induce. Most damning of all, the authors claim both that Brazilians are highly materialistic, being that they are more consumerist, and that Brazil has one of the most unequal distributions of wealth in the world. As such, they continue, Brazilians are desperate and far more likely to steal from tourists. They use these statements to again reinforce how likely it is that one will be burgled. By the end of this chapter, it's not a question of if one will be a victim of robbery, but rather why one absolutely will be robbed. If the authors took time to note simply the importance of carrying cash safely without constant repetition, and if they didn't reason that Brazilians are desperate to rob their tourists, then it wouldn't seem that Brazil is such a harsh environment. Moreover, by comparing and contrasting the daily proceedings of the rich and the poor, many tourists fall into this bottom half as they would not usually consistently ride planes and tend to drive more often. In being such, readers will more than likely believe that regardless of what they do, without the money to get a taxi or get premium healthcare plans, they are doomed to the harsh Brazil that the authors make it out to be. However, I'm not sure that this comparison is avoidable since it happens naturally within the giving of information about plane travel compared to car travel, but in compilation with the previous information received from the authors, the reader can't help but feel that the authors are promoting stereotypes for poorer Brazil. Are the authors teaching the readers of the cultures found in Brazil, or are they inadvertently reproaching and defaming Brazil as a whole? The authors seem to try to state their data matter-of-factly, but the hyperboles and repetition make it seem more like a guide for a place that will hurt you, or worse. The way that the authors compare and contrast the rich Brazil, who take planes across relatively short distances and have private healthcare plans, with the poor Brazil, who drive or ride public transport, seems to imply that when encountering the poor Brazil, one is in danger at all times. This attitude appears to be contrived merely from the standpoint of a foreigner and is unfamiliar in an unfamiliar environment. I do not believe it is the author's intentions to implicate that Brazil is a place of tragedy, but they come off as such. So, they do stereotypes and stuff. The end.